Hi everyone, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. Today I'll be demonstrating how to create this fun standing castle cake. It's not technically sculpted, we are going to be using a really easy stencil from Cascakery. And if you have a rectangle cake tin, that would work really well here. Just make sure that it is 10 inches wide or 10.5 inches wide at a minimum. Using the Egg Bay cake leveler here to level off my cakes and to cut them into their individual layers. You could stop at 2, but I am just obsessed with how thin you can make these layers, so I always like to go just a little bit further and cut them down in half again. Lay your castle stencil over the top. This is the medium-sized one, so there is a smaller one and a large one. I've gone with the middle size. Use a nice sharp knife to carefully cut around your stencil. Hold that stencil nice and flat against the cake to make sure that it doesn't move around, and then carefully work your way around. Once you've cut around the whole perimeter of your castle, you can start removing the excess cake. So if you have that rectangle cake tin, you won't have as much cake wastage. This just means that we're going to have a lot of cake pops for the family tonight. From here, I'd like to actually freeze these in between baking paper layers, and that way when I construct the cake it's a lot more easier. They're not going to be so flexible, and it just comes together a lot neater. I would recommend about an hour or so in the freezer. You could cover it with Glad wrap first to make sure that it doesn't dry out, and then here I'm applying some baking paper to a cake board and using some chocolate buttercream to fill in the spaces. You could smooth it out with a little spatula, and then on goes your next layer of cake. Again, if these were a little bit more frozen and firm, you could place them on there with ease. Continue filling as you go until you have all 4 layers constructed. Remember to remove the little window piece and then create a crumb coat, trapping the crumbs all over the cake. As a force of habit, I like to start at the very top, pushing it out to the sides, removing any buttercream from those little windows, and then moving on to the edges. Once it's all nice and covered, including those little cavities, you can take a frosting scraper and just go around the perimeter. Pop it into your fridge to set for a good half hour, and then go on with a second layer again just to make it nice and neat. Once you've created that second layer, flip your cake over, remove that baking paper, and just cover the front with more of that buttercream. Being that it's covered in fondant, yes, you can use buttercream, or you could also use ganache, whichever one you like. I always find that using dark chocolate ganache creates a bit more of a sleeker finish and works a little bit nicer with fondant. When it's nice and neat, pop it back into the fridge and then start rolling out your fondant. I've got some Bakel's fondant or Pednings, and then we're just going to be applying it to the bottom half of our cake with a little bit of water that I pushed on to make it nice and sticky. And I'm making a note not to cover the towers, just the body of the castle. Create an incision where the little doorway is, and then press the fondant in there. You could always add a panel into that section to close it up. Make an indent for the windows, and then gently cut away the excess with a nice sharp knife or spatula. Stand it up and stick it to a cake board with a little bit of buttercream underneath. For the tiles on our towers, I'm using this multi-cutter, giving it a good tap to release all little elements that we've cut out, and then sticking them to the cake one by one, a little bit of water to help them to stay in place. And we're going to also be feeding these through the little pockets between the towers, so we're covering up the whole cake. You can then use like a boning tool of some kind and create the illusion of bricks on your fondant. And I steamed my cake after this with a cake steamer just to remove any of the excess cornstarch. You don't want to do it now because you're going to be running that little tool along the fondant and it gets really sticky. You don't want it to rip. Onto the decorative elements. So I'm using a little bit of water again, brushed onto the fondant, and then rolling some little balls to create the rocks formed around the entrance. I have some white chocolate ganache tinted red with super red gel food color. And then we have an assortment of Halloween inspired sprinkles from My Dream Cake. A huge thank you to My Dream Cake for sponsoring this video. You can find all of the tools used in this tutorial at the My Dream Cake website, or check the link in our bio for a full list of what we used here today. Thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.